Hello and welcome to the special edition of the Newsmakers reflecting on 2 years since the October 7th attacks. As Israeli and Hamas delegations continue their indirect peace talks in Egypt, the world reflects on years of utter desperation in the Middle East. Retribution for the Hamas attacks became what international authorities later recognized as genocide. Today, Gaza lies in ruins with nearly 70,000 killed and starvation widespread. I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's Newsmaker is October 7th. Well, the relentless bombardment, death, and destruction in Gaza has shocked the world. And while Israel has seen few or no consequences for it, there has been some notable action taken. Arrest warrants for both Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant were issued by the International Criminal Court. They face charges of war crimes, including the use of starvation and murder. Also, unwavering U.S. support for Israel has compromised U.S. relations with its strongest allies, as more and more countries officially recognize Palestinian statehood. Nevertheless, what's been officially called a genocide continues unabated. Here's a look now at the result of Israel's 2-year onslaught on Gaza.
Mass destruction, starvation, death. For the past 2 years, Israel has created this nightmare in Gaza. On October 7, 2023, Hamas fighters launched a shocking attack, crossing into Israeli territory, killing nearly 1,200 people and taking more than 240 hostages. In response, Israel launched what many are calling a genocidal war on Gaza. More than 67,000 people have been killed. An investigation by 3 media outlets revealed that according to the Israeli intelligence database, 83% of the dead were civilians as of May this year. The relentless assault has forced Gaza's population to flee again and again. But there is nowhere left to go, as Israel has targeted homes, schools and hospitals. 90% of Gaza's infrastructure has been destroyed. While airstrikes leveled buildings, ground operations have flattened entire neighborhoods.
Our children are gone. Our mothers are gone. Our sons and our youth are gone. Everything is gone, and we have nothing left. Our homes are destroyed, and we have been displaced.
They flee bombs, but then face another Israeli weapon, starvation. The blockade and unlivable conditions have pushed Gaza into famine. At least 455 people have died from malnutrition, and those who are seeking aid have repeatedly come under Israeli fire.
It's kids, it's children.
Israel has spared no one, making the war on Gaza the deadliest for journalists and UN workers.
Today's genocide is something different. It's openly incited, cynically denied, and relentlessly supported, armed, and weaponized, while those who oppose it are silenced, beaten, criminalized, and smeared. This is why I say this is the shame of our time, and the collapse of the international legal order lays in this moment.
Despite the growing outrage, even among Israel's traditional allies, a free Palestine is still a long haul. Many have criticized US President Donald Trump's 20-point peace plan, saying it does not offer an end to the decades-long Israeli occupation. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has firmly rejected the idea of a Palestinian state.
We, as citizens, are concerned that this war ends, that this slaughter, this displacement, and this exodus stop, and that there will be stability, security, and peace. But the plan, as it appears, does not fulfill the people's hopes. Everything written in it serves the enemy's interests more than it serves the people's interests.
And then there is the trust issue, with Israel repeatedly undermining peace efforts. It has killed top Hamas figures, targeted its negotiators, and shattered a ceasefire that took effect in January. With an international arrest warrant hanging over him for crimes against humanity, Netanyahu is becoming more and more isolated. Still, peace remains elusive, and so does a dignified life for Palestinians and healing from generations of trauma and harm inflicted by Israel.
Now, before we get to our panel, let's first cross to correspondent Ashraf Shannon. He joins us now live from Gaza. Hi, Ashraf. It has been an unimaginable 2 years. So give us a sense of how Gazans are feeling on this very ominous anniversary.
Well, 2 years ago, life changed forever for more than 2.4 million Palestinians living in Gaza. And since then, more than 67,000 people have lost their lives during this Israeli genocidal war and ethnic cleansing that has taken its toll on all aspects of life here. Hundreds of thousands, even more than 1 million people have been displaced internally dozens of times since the beginning of the war. Famine has been declared for the first time ever in the Middle East in Gaza City. And the situation continues to worsen by the day under the watchful eye of the international community. There's daily killings, people losing their lives due to sickness, due to injuries. Humanitarian conditions have rapidly deteriorated and continue to deteriorate. People continue to suffer all over the Gaza Strip, and especially in Gaza City. Back to you.
Okay, Ashraf Shannon, joining us live there in Gaza. Thank you so much for that. Well, joining me now in the studio to look back at the 2 years since October 7th, I have a very special panel with me both in the studio and via video link. Here in Istanbul with me, our author, historian, and professorial research associate at SOAS, Haim Bresheeth. Plus, Palestinian analyst and former chairperson of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, Kamel Hawwash. From Tel Aviv, journalist and columnist for Haaretz, Gideon Levy. From Ramallah, professor of diplomacy at the Arab American University, Palestine, Dalal Iriqat. And in Washington, we have former Foreign Service officer at the U.S. Department of State, Mike Casey. Really, thank you all so much for being with me. Gideon, I have to start with you because remembering that day as an Israeli living in Israel, what did you think as you saw the attack unfold? And did you feel Israel fundamentally change from that day forward?
It was a surprise. It was a surprise, and it wasn't a surprise because I did expect that Gaza will explode one day, because you don't put 2 million people in a cage and expect for nothing. So on the 7th of October, we were all surprised. But looking backwards, you tell yourself, what did you expect? That they will stay in the cage forever? 2 years later, total different reality. Israel is different, Gaza is unlivable, and nobody knows where are we aiming.
How is Israel different, very quickly? How have the people really changed?
There is really a cloud over the heads of everyone here, but the main concern is about the hostages, the soldiers, ending the war. Unfortunately, the genocide is totally denied in Israel, and it is not in the Israeli discourse. And this is very regrettable, because this should be the first issue and the first motivation to put an end to all this.
Dalal, let me turn to you. You witnessed October 7th, from the West Bank. What went through your mind, and how did you ultimately feel toward Hamas?
Well, to be honest, we should all be surprised today that the genocidal war is still ongoing, while Israel's atrocities, war crimes, and genocide is all documented. We as academics and analysts today know that we had witnessed a case study of application of theory into practice. Unfortunately, multilateralism was tested in the past 2 years, diplomacy was tested, humanity was tested, yet everybody had failed the humanity, everybody had failed the Palestinians and the Gazans. What we can say today is that, yes, as you said, 83% were civilians, but 70% also were women and children. Half of the population of Gaza are children. The genocide is very documented. However, the final point and the conclusion is that the Palestinians live under an Israeli military occupation. This military occupation is, for more than 7 decades, comes under the package of apartheid, settler colonialism, settler terrorism, extrajudicial killings, detentions. And guess what? Today, this morning in Ramallah, we have Israeli checkpoints in downtown Ramallah. So the problem, the root cause of what we are facing is not a surprising genocide that started on October 7, 2 years ago. This is a problem that started around 7 decades ago, where Israel is enjoying every impunity possible. The shielding that had been given to Israel by the powerful countries, to start with the US,
right.
You know, whether it is diplomatic shielding, military shielding, financial shielding, is what keeps Israel and Netanyahu and his like-minded right-wing government continue with war crimes against the Palestinian people.
Okay, let me come to the studio and ask Haim. I mean, not just for your personal sentiments, but did you know something like this would have to happen?
I was sure it will happen. I was in Doha a week before, and after I spoke and warned people about something like that, I was asked by someone in the audience, why am I so negative? Because we have the Abraham Accord, so this can't happen anymore. You know, a lot of people believed in that nonsense. How many ceasefire did we have in the last 2 years? How many peace plans did we have for the last 77 years? There's not a single Palestinian living today that lived with any rights, that lived as a free person.
Right.
We are talking about a nation of millions of people, as many as the Israeli Jews, that has never had any rights and is not going to have any rights under this so-called peace plan, which is basically an application for the Nobel Prize for the American president rather than a peace plan.
No.
We are actually at a level of depravity that we have never seen in living memory. I think we have to mark this day as the worst day for international law and for humanity. 2 years for this without a break. And still, talking about peace, there is no break in the violence.
You know, it's incredible. You made me cast my mind back to, it was May of 2021 when Israel was bombing Gaza then. And I remember Palestinians telling me, no, it's different this time. This is the game changer. And nothing happened. And then October 7th came. And it's only been a downward trajectory, a fast one, since then. But hold on, Haim, hold your thoughts, because I do want to include everybody. And Kamel, I mean, over the course of the war on Gaza, how much has Israel then inadvertently strengthened the resistance, the ideology of the resistance, and even further radicalized the people that it has to inevitably live with, whether as an independent state or integration into one state? How much more damage has this assault done?
Yeah, and in addition to that, it's radicalized the Israeli people. Because this hatred, this we can't live with these people, we want them out, was done as well. So there is the radicalization of elements. But it has also ignited support for the Palestinians across the world. So in fact, Israel has lost on every count, apart from the fact that it breaches international law on a daily basis, commits war crimes against children. It's deployed 2 weapons very strongly this time. In my view, one is a weapon of starvation. We haven't seen that done on such a scale. But also the weapon of lying. Because what it does is commits the crimes and then says, I'm the victim, I should be allowed to do whatever I want. And in the meantime, international law, as far as Israel is concerned, doesn't apply to it. It applies the law of the jungle. And as for the peace plan that we've heard about from Trump, actually I call it the second Balfour Declaration. If you remember in 1917, a Zionist and a Western leader sat together and decided what should happen to the Palestinians. What happened last week was exactly the same. A Zionist in Netanyahu sitting with a Western leader and deciding what should happen to the Palestinians. So it's not even Oslo or
right.
It is with and without the presence of the Palestinian people. For as long as Jewish supremacy exists in Israel, we will continue to have the Palestinians resist.
Mike Casey, I'm wondering how you feel about that analysis. I mean, you eventually resigned from the U.S. State Department over its handling of the war on Gaza. Can you pinpoint the turning point for you?
I mean, the turning point for me was really just when we're talking about the future of Gaza, and that we were just going along with whatever the Israelis were planning to do, despite our analysis that those things were not going to work. And to go back to October 7th, it was not surprising that something happened. We had been reporting that for some time, that the situation here is unsustainable. The status quo is unsustainable, but there was no interest in Washington in doing anything differently. We're just letting things continue to go and continue to get worse until it finally reached a boiling point where something happened. And we're at the point now where we're still talking about the future of Gaza, which is excluding Palestinians and their input and what's going to happen, and just focusing on Gaza and not talking about Palestine as a whole. I'm not talking about the East Bank, or the West Bank, talking about East Jerusalem and what's going to happen there. And so I think we're still having these very short-sighted plans that are accommodating very much to Israeli interests and not the Palestinian interests, which will not be sustainable or successful.
Mike, are there any voices like yours left now in the State Department?
There's certainly people who think that way, but they're clearly silenced. I mean, people were silenced before President Trump took over, and then now with the atmosphere in Washington, people would be even more afraid to speak out. So in terms of people who are making impacts on policy, probably not. I think all the voices in there now are very much just following President Trump's lead and what he has proposed. So I don't think there's many dissenting voices, and if they are, they would be probably silenced, even more so than they were before. And quickly then, as an American, I mean, where do you see these negotiations now going in Egypt? I mean, the negotiations, how many rounds of negotiations have we had? And I don't think the situation is much different now. I know there's the 20-point peace plan that President Trump put forward, which is both too detailed and not detailed enough. It focuses on some long-term issues, disarmament and economic investment in Gaza that are perhaps too far down the road. But in the near term, it doesn't mention, any withdrawals from the West Bank, doesn't mention any ceasing of anything in East Jerusalem. It doesn't talk about a lot of those things that need to happen. I mean, it should be really focused on ceasefire, getting aid in, exchanging hostages and prisoners, and some withdrawals of troops. But it's just another proposal that's gone forward. Yeah. Negotiations have been going on for some time. I don't think it's really any different than it has been. I mean, okay, Gideon, if we're looking at the negotiations now underway, we're looking first at a prisoner or hostage swap, depending on how you characterize them. How desperate are Hamas and Palestinians, do you think, to get their hostages back? And what has Israel left for them to go home to? I mean, does Israel see the prisoners they hold as leverage in these negotiations, or are they just kind of collateral?
They're not a main leverage because Hamas wants them, obviously, but it's not the main goal of Hamas. It is the first stage, but Hamas, because it has no other choice, had to release them all without really getting anything except of the release of the Palestinian prisoners. And even about the identity of those prisoners, I'm not sure that Hamas will get exactly those that he's asking for. And above all, for example, Barghouti, I'm afraid, will not be released. And if he is not released, Hamas will really come out quite weak out of this deal. But do Hamas have another choice? They are totally right now on their knees when the Americans are pushing so hard.
Dalal, I see you mostly agreeing there, yeah?
Well, I think here we have to resort to the four Geneva Conventions, international law, and respect the fact that the hostages need to be released. However, this is also a reminder that the more than 11,000 Palestinian prisoners behind Israeli bars, half of those are administratively detained, deserve freedom if anybody would resort to international law and what is accepted or not accepted. However, when we go back to the negotiations, my fear is that we continue to deal with negotiations as if it is the end in itself, rather than anchoring back to conflict resolution and political science, and remembering that negotiations is only a tool towards the end of dignity, peace, security, statehood, independence, right of self-determination for the Palestinian people who had been suffering under an Israeli military occupation. The fact that Trump had laid and I don't call it a plan, to be honest. I look at it from a principles point of view, and the fact that we had seen a tsunami of diplomacy at the UN General Assembly, pioneered by Saudi Arabia and France, and the fact that the foreign ministers of those Arab and Islamic countries, including Turkey, Tunisia, Indonesia and Pakistan, had that meeting with Trump. This gives me a little bit of optimism when we look at negotiating the Trump's declaration of principles in respect to what the Arabs and the Islamic countries had put at the table. Does this give us any guarantees? Does this mean that the minute the hostages are released, that Israel will not breach and violate every agreement? From our experiences as Palestinians, I mean, in all the rounds of negotiations, we are used to Israel breaching any agreement. Also, the ceasefires that we had seen earlier this year. However, if Trump is serious, if there is a will, there is a way. The thing is, they need to use negotiations as a tool and not to take us into deja vu scenarios of pragmatism and negotiations for the sake of negotiations, while Israel is still occupying militarily the Palestinians, not only in Gaza, but also in the West Bank.
Okay. Kamel, let me ask you this, though, because as for the people that are actually supposed to be negotiating this deal right now, Israel tried to kill these negotiators just a few weeks ago. Do you feel that motivated them to make a deal, given how close they actually were to death? Or did it actually make them more cynical, less willing to concede? Did it harden their positions?
I think what all Palestinians, including the leaders of Hamas, want is an end to the slaughter. So they are looking for a way to stop people being killed, because Israel is quite happy to continue for months, and I mean months, with the killing. So I think that there's been, that's an internal pressure. But yes, everyone, the way that Trump formulated this plan was to bring the Arab states and Muslim states in, had a meeting with them, then went and they agreed to the deal, then he went and changed it with Netanyahu. So they actually don't know what it is that that is being negotiated on. Hamas was quite, in my view, clever in the way it formulated its response, leading with the issue of the prisoners, Israeli prisoners, because that's what Trump looks at. Where does that come? And so they did that. And then on the other issues, they separated issues that they had to respond to from issues that the Palestinian people as a whole should be responding to. And I think that's why I say they were clever in the way that they formulated it. But in terms of, they are under tremendous pressure. There's no doubt about that. They are weakened. Yes, they are. Red lines, including the bombing of Qatar by Israel, yes, puts more pressure, because Qatar, I'm sure, is saying to them, come on, guys, you need to come up with the goods here. So, but what's going to happen now is Netanyahu will prolong these discussions for as long as possible, so that he can continue with the leveling of Gaza, because really that's what he wants, and with destroying the Palestinian identity in Gaza and then in the West Bank.
Haim, I'm wondering, do you think Qatar is saying that because they were struck in an Israeli attack as well, that they want this moved forward as quickly as possible, similar to what Trump's, if you want to call it, pragmatism is right now?
We have to remember that Qatar was playing both sides at the same time. They housed the negotiations and also allowed the refueling of the Israeli jets above Doha. So this is totally a mad situation. Now, I agree with Dalal that, Hamas is weakened, but think about it. After 2 years, this small and weak organization in comparison to the huge Israeli army, which has got any weapon that you can think of and some that you can't, Hamas is fighting with firearms against the most modern army you can imagine, and they're still here. So I think that the peace plan is not Trump's, it's Netanyahu's. He ran to daddy in Washington like he did before, like he did on the 12-day war with Iran. Said, get us out of there, get us out of there. Now, the minute that Israel signs something, they start breaking it. When they free hostages, and all the Palestinians in Israeli jails are hostages, Most of them are held there without any accusation. The minute they're out, they are starting to be rearrested again. Yeah. Israel has never signed anything that it hasn't broken. So I'm not very optimistic. And 2 weeks ago, the whole of the United Nations voted more or less for a Palestinian state. Mm-hmm. Okay, this was two weeks ago. 1 week ago, no one is talking about a Palestinian state. Nobody is talking about peace, about real political resolution of the conflict. We must go back to that.
Yeah, but it seems from the perspective of the negotiations now, they just want to take it step by step or point by point before those 20 points are completed. But Mike, let me ask you quickly, when you have negotiators like Jared Kushner at the table, is there actual scope for fairness here? We're talking about someone who has known Netanyahu since childhood. He has been a family friend.
There isn't really. I mean, the United States lost its credibility as a mediator a long time ago. I mean, we're clearly biased towards the Israeli side in these negotiations. And, you know, as we see with many things in the Trump administration, when they do put a team forward, it's not a very well-qualified team with a lot of skill and background and depth, and most policies are not very well thought out and not very well executed. So I don't have much faith that the team there is well prepared, that they're well briefed, that they have a lot of information going forward, and that they're clearly not biased towards one side, which they are.
Okay. That will unfortunately have to be the final word for this special edition of the Newsmakers. I'd like to thank all 5 of my panelists sincerely so much for joining us, and our viewers for being with us as well. Remember, you can follow us on social media, and do be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.